Some faces just feel wrong. Not monstrous or alien exactly, but eerily close to human, close enough to be disturbing. You know that moment when you see it. Something's off. And before your mind can process what it is, your body's already alarmed. This doesn't feel right. Psychologists refer to this reaction as the uncanny valley, a deep-seated fear triggered by things that mimic human appearance without fully being human. But why would we develop such a strong instinctive response to faces that almost resemble ours? Our brains were shaped in ancient environments, worlds full of predators and prey long before the age of robots or cinema. So, what if this fear isn't modern at all? What if it's a leftover from a time when we weren't the only human-like species on Earth? A time when other creatures, some that coexisted with us, some we mated with, and others we fought, walked the land. Maybe the uncanny valley isn't just a psychological glitch. Maybe it's an ancient warning system. And today, we're going to break it down. The term uncanny valley was coined in the 1970s by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori. He observed that when robots looked more human, people initially responded with empathy. But past a certain point, the response changed. That growing human likeness triggered not comfort but uneasy, even fear. The robot was to lifelike, but not quite right. The emotional reaction dropped suddenly, creating what Mori called the Valley of the Uncanny. And it didn't just apply to robots. Wax figures, prosthetic limbs, CGI characters that missed the mark, anything that resembled a human but lacked full authenticity provoked a similar gut-level discomfort. There's no need to think about it, it happens instantly, buried deep within the brain. But why? Our ancestors didn't evolve in a world with androids or digital avatars. They lived in wildernesses filled with predators, unknown terrain, and other people. Reactions this intense and widespread don't just happen by chance. They evolve for survival. Think of our instinctive fear of snakes. Humans and other primates are biologically programmed to be wary of them, and for good reason. In one study, researchers exposed monkeys to shapes that only vaguely resembled snakes, and even these crude forms triggered fear responses. Why? Because for millions of years, snakes were lethal threats. Any primate that failed to detect them likely didn't live long enough to reproduce. Now ask yourself, could our reaction to the uncanny valley be the same kind of survival instinct? A mental alarm bell, fine-tuned to detect and fear other species of humans, ones that looked like us but weren't. The very existence of this phenomenon implies that, sometime in our distant past, there was a real reason to be wary of nearly human faces. So who or what were we afraid of? For most of our evolutionary timeline, we weren't alone. Homo sapiens, modern humans, didn't emerge into an empty world. When we appeared, Earth was already home to a variety of hominin species, some close relatives, others more distantly related. To begin with, our ancestors weren't top of the food chain. Far from it, they were often prey, not predators. If you think today's African wilderness is unforgiving, it's nothing compared to what Homo erectus faced. Saber-toothed cats lurked in the shadows, massive territorial hippos patrolled waterways, and countless other deadly creatures roamed the land. And the threats weren't limited to animals. Our ancestors shared the land with several other hominids. Homo erectus would have encountered species like Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis, similar but unmistakably different. Mistaking them for kin on your way back from a hunt could be a fatal error. But those were just the familiar ones. There were also hominins from completely different evolutionary paths. 2 million years ago, small-bodied Australopithecines still roamed the land. Their appearance was bizarre, brains no bigger than a chimp's, yet they walked fully upright. Picture this: after a long day hunting, you sit back and watch your children play. Then you spot a lanky figure motioning to your child. Before you can grab your weapon, it snatches your kid and disappears into the night. Being a parent today is scary, but back then, they may have faced actual child snatchers, creatures that didn't just take kids, but ate them. Other species, like the paranthropines, were likely more passive. Some researchers compare them to the cattle of our evolutionary tree, designed to chew through large amounts of vegetation. They might not have hunted us, but their presence would have been unsettling. They moved upright like us, clearly part of our family tree, yet everything about them was off. Huge jaws, sloping brows, lean wiry frames, they looked human, but weren't, and they weren't the only ones. There were even more distant ape relatives roaming the same land. Let's not forget the ancestors of today's gorillas and chimpanzees. Fossils of their early relatives have been uncovered in East Africa, meaning encounters with them were inevitable. While today's apes seemed shy thanks in part to human encroachment and hunting to million years ago, they probably didn't fear us one bit. Then there were African primates that seemed like creatures from a nightmare. Take Dinopithecus, for example, a baboon-like giant with enormous fangs. Males could reach over 170 pounds. Imagine that beast moving on all fours, fangs gleaming with saliva. It's hard to capture just how terrifying it would have been to stumble upon a hostile group of them. Another terrifying creature, Therapithecus. Though modern versions still exist in the highlands of Ethiopia, they were much larger back in the days of Homo erectus. Some males weighed as much as 160 pounds heavier than most male erectus individuals, who probably averaged 130 to 140 pounds. Still, despite their size and threat, there's evidence suggesting that early humans didn't just fear these animals, they hunted them. At one archaeological site, signs point to Homo erectus targeting young Therapithecus as prey. So, while the world was brutal, our ancestors didn't just survive it, they fought back. Homo erectus, one of our earliest known ancestors, came across a wide range of primates and hominins that likely triggered what we now recognize as the uncanny valley effect. Some faces just don't sit right, not because they're grotesque or alien, but because they're almost human. That eerie closeness unsettles you. You know the moment it hits, something feels off. And before your mind has time to process why, your body already recoils. This is wrong. Psychologists have a name for it, the uncanny valley. A deep-seated unease toward figures that appear human but aren't. But where did this instinct come from? Our brains are ancient tools, forged in an unforgiving world of danger and survival, long before robots or special effects existed. So maybe this reaction reaches back to something older. Maybe it's a lingering echo from a time when we weren't the only human-like beings on Earth. When other species walked beside us, some we allied with, some we had children with, and others we feared or fought. What if the uncanny valley isn't just a strange curiosity? What if it's a survival mechanism buried deep in our history? That's what we're about to explore. The uncanny valley was first introduced by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori in the 1970s. He observed that the more human a robot appeared, the more people initially empathized with it. But once it crossed a certain threshold where it looked almost human but not quite, people didn't respond with warmth. Instead, they felt repulsed, uneasy, even afraid. It slipped into what he called a valley of discomfort. And this wasn't limited to robots. Wax statues, prosthetic limbs, CGI characters, anything that mimicked humanity a little too closely could provoke the same disturbing reaction. The smallest imperfection, a stiff blink, an unnatural posture was enough to make our skin crawl. And we don't consciously decide this. The reaction is instant, buried in the core of our minds. So, why would we carry such a reflex at all? Our early ancestors didn't grow up with androids or digital avatars. They evolved in a brutal world of predators, foreign environments, and unfamiliar faces. Powerful, universal instincts like this don't emerge without purpose. They form because they once served a critical role in keeping us alive. Take our fear of snakes, for example. It's nearly hardwired into primates, including humans. In one remarkable study, even vague snake-like shapes caused stress in monkeys. That reaction exists because for millions of years, snakes posed a real threat. Those who failed to recognize that danger didn't live long enough to reproduce. So now, ask yourself this: could the uncanny valley work the same way? Could it be a built-in alarm, warning us of other types of humans, ones who looked like us but weren't? The very existence of this response suggests that in our deep past, we had real reason to fear beings who were nearly human. But who exactly were we afraid of? Our species, Homo sapiens, didn't appear on a deserted planet. For most of our evolutionary story, we shared the world with other human relatives, some closely related, others from entirely different branches. And for much of that time, we weren't the dominant force. Far from it, our ancestors were often prey before they became predators. Imagine the ancient landscapes of Africa far more perilous than today. Homo erectus, one of our early ancestors, lived among saber-toothed cats, aggressive hippos, and countless other deadly creatures. But it wasn't just the animals. Early humans lived among other hominins. Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis were around similar, yet distinct. Mistaking them for your own clan could be a fatal error, and the diversity didn't stop there. 2 million years ago, small-bodied Australopithecines still roamed parts of Africa. They had brains the size of chimpanzees, but walked upright like us. Picture this: after a long hunt, you rest while your children play nearby. Suddenly, you spot a thin figure coaxing one of your children away. Before you can act, it snatches your child and vanishes into the dark. These weren't metaphors for stranger danger. They were very real threats, possibly literal predators of our young. Other species, like Paranthropus, may have been more passive. Some researchers describe them as the cows of the human family tree built to consume vast amounts of vegetation. They probably weren't hunting our children, but even so, their presence would have been unsettling. Upright posture, vaguely familiar faces, but odd proportions, massive jaws, sloped brows, wiry builds. Human ... but clearly not. Then there were even more distant ape relatives, including the ancestors of gorillas and chimpanzees. Fossils suggest these primates shared the same habitats as us. And while today's chimps and gorillas might shy away from humans, their ancestors likely didn't. 2 million years ago, we weren't something to be feared. And let's not forget the monstrous ones, primates that look like nightmares. Take Dinopithecus, a giant, baboon-like creature with enormous fangs. Some adult males could weigh over 170 pounds. Imagine facing an aggressive troop of them. Terrifying doesn't begin to describe it. Then there's Therapithecus. A modern, smaller version still lives in Ethiopia, but in the days of Homo erectus, they were much larger. Some males tipped the scales at 160 pounds more than many human males of the time. And while these animals were dangerous, there's evidence that early humans may have hunted their young, proving we weren't always the victims. We were also opportunistic predators. Homo erectus likely crossed paths with countless hominins and primates that fell deep into the uncanny. Now, fast forward a few 100,000 years. Our species, Homo sapiens, is rising, but we're still not alone. In Africa, we coexisted with Homo naledi, a species with a strange blend of ancient and modern traits. Though we shared the continent for hundreds of thousands of years, there's no solid evidence we interbred. So far, their remains have only been found in one South African cave system, and remarkably, they may have been placing their dead inside intentionally, an early sign of ritual. Heading west, we encounter another mysterious human species. But we haven't found their bones, only their DNA, lingering in the genes of modern West Africans. This ghost lineage likely interbred with our ancestors as recently as 50,000 years ago. What were they like? We're still waiting on fossils to give us clues. But once Homo sapiens left Africa, the world only got stranger. To the north and west, we met the Neanderthals. Incredibly strong, but intelligent, too. Our first contact likely happened over 100,000 years ago in Western Asia. As we pushed into Europe, we began to intermix. Early European humans held on to Neanderthal traits for generations. But over time, much of that genetic legacy faded. Today, Europeans average less than 2% Neanderthal DNA. Asian populations retain slightly more. Asia, however, had its own mysteries. We discovered the Denisovans, one of the most puzzling hominins we've found. Only recently did we recover a Denisovan's skull, and there's still so much to uncover. In Southeast Asia, Homo floresiensis the hobbits roamed the islands. So did Homo luzonensis, another diminutive species. Despite our differences, we didn't only fear these others, we mated with them. We know without a doubt that Homo sapiens interbred with Neanderthals, Denisovans, and a third unidentified hominin in Africa. So, what does this mean for the uncanny valley? If it was a defense mechanism, why did we sometimes mate with the very beings it warned us about? That paradox may be the key. The uncanny valley triggers not just fear, but a mix of caution and curiosity. There are a few possible explanations for how this complex instinct developed. All are rooted in survival. The first is disease avoidance. In prehistoric times, with no medicine or understanding of infection, diseases could wipe out entire communities. Outsiders, especially those who looked slightly off, may have been seen as dangerous, possibly carrying unseen threats. Strangely enough, humans likely inherited genital herpes from Paranthropus over 2 million years ago. Maybe that was one time the instincts failed. Subtle physical cues, pale skin, odd eyes, unnatural motion, strange posture may have evolved into warning signs. And nothing represents contagion more than death itself. A corpse is still human in shape, but lifeless. Recognizing death quickly could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. That brings us to the second theory, death recognition. Ancient humans needed to know when someone was truly gone. Our brains may have adapted to notice the faintest difference between life and death. That's why so many horror films use cold, pale skin, and unnatural movements. It taps directly into this primitive trigger. Then there's the third idea, enemy detection. Our ancestors didn't just face wild animals, they faced other humans. Rival tribes of Homo sapiens, encounters with Neanderthals, Denisovans, or the last surviving Homo erectus, individuals who looked similar enough to pass but unfamiliar enough to raise alarm. Survival depended on reading faces, body language, and subtle cues distinguishing friend from foe, mate from murderer. The uncanny valley could have evolved as a razor-sharp detection system, one that helped our ancestors judge quickly when a figure was almost human, but not quite. That would explain why the reaction is so immediate, bypassing conscious thought. Could this instinct be one of the reasons why all the other human species disappeared? Maybe, after all, wherever we went, the others vanished. Even though we sometimes interbred, it seems to have been rare. And even today, humans often react to the unfamiliar with hostility. So, what does this mean in the modern age? Most of us will never experience the deadly pressures that shaped our evolution. We don't fight over hunting grounds or skin the forest for Neanderthals. Yet the fear persists. You can feel it when someone watches you in the dark, even if no one is there. When wax figures or computer-generated faces trigger a chill. It's the same ancient alarm, still active beneath the surface. Maybe this fear is a relic, an evolutionary scar from a world where humans weren't the only ones who walked upright.